Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to the Bible study. We are in Isaiah chapter 20, a shorter and I think much more straightforward chapter today than some of the ones that we've seen in the last couple days. Definitely a little bit easier to get your head wrapped around. So we're going to take a look at that shorter outline today, which you can download on our website. There's a link down in the description. Okay, so chapter 20, God is basically going to make Isaiah into a walking, talking sign to the nations, and especially to the nation of Judah. But before we talk about that, let's talk about timeline. We do have some pretty specific dates for this chapter and the things that go on here. So the second line there on our when section, God spoke to Isaiah in the year that Assyria conquered the Philistine city of Ashdod. We know from secular history that's about 711 BC. And Isaiah spends the next 3 years being a visible sign to God's people. 4 key characters, we know all but one of them. So Isaiah, that's God's prophet. King Sargon is the new one here. From the details in the text, this appears to be Sargon II, who reigned over Assyria from 722 to 705 BC. We have the nation of Egypt. We've talked about them in the last chapter, actually. And then the nation of Cush, which is sometimes called Ethiopia in other versions of the Bible. They were south of Egypt along the coast of the Red Sea. And as you were going through the text, you may have stumbled across these few words that maybe you were not as familiar with. First one we'll define as sackcloth in verse 2. This is a really rough, uncomfortable fabric that was worn by people who were publicly mourning, and not only was it uncomfortable to the person, but it was also a sign to other people that you were sad about something, you were mourning something. A death, a loss, a tragedy, something like that. And then we have a portent in verse 3. This is a sign or a warning that something is about to happen, often something really big. Isaiah is a walking portent to the people of Judah, Egypt, and Cush in chapter 20. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Our 6 verses today are entitled Isaiah Naked as a Sign to Egypt, Cush, and Judah. The jobs that God's prophets often got to do. This is definitely a little bit different than some of the other ones, the other chapters that we've looked at, but the general messaging, I guess, is the same. God spoke to Isaiah in the year that Assyria, ruled by King Sargon, conquered the Philistine city of Ashdod. And again, it was about 711 BC. So we are skipping some time in between some of the oracles that we saw previously and here, because this is actually after Assyria has come down and conquered the nation of Israel, that northern kingdom. This happens after that. So God told Isaiah to take off his sackcloth clothing and to walk naked amongst the people. And Isaiah did this. He walked around naked and barefoot for 3 years. Now, we don't know if he had to walk around like that all the time or just, part of the day every day or something like that. But he had to, this had to be a visible and ongoing thing that he did. And this was to be a sign to the people of Egypt and Cush of how the Assyrians would carry them away captive after conquering them. Judah had put a lot of trust in Cush and Egypt and maybe potential alliances with them, which we've talked about. But God right here is saying, hey, look at Isaiah. He's walking around naked. This is the way that these defenders that you want to make alliances with, you're putting your hope and trust in Egypt and Cush. This is what they're going to look like when the Assyrians come down and conquer them. These proud nations were going to be humiliated, and the people of Judah would be ashamed of themselves for having put their hope in alliances with them. Isaiah said, quote, "They shall be dismayed and ashamed because of Cush, their hope, and of Egypt, their boast." Their hope, their boast really should have been in the Lord, not in these other countries to defend them. And remember, God's already told Judah, he says, I'm not going to let the Assyrians do this to you. They're not going to conquer you. But it isn't going to be because you made a bunch of foreign alliances with these other people. Okay, so that is chapter 20. Let's talk application. Being a servant of God isn't always a desirable or admirable job. I think in the modern day, we often think of great servants of God as maybe well-known preachers or speakers, best-selling Christian book authors, or these people that get invited to travel around to go to all the Christian conferences and do all the speaking. And those are usually positions that come with some kind of prestige, honor, maybe money, and most of us probably wouldn't mind being in those positions if we had the opportunity, right? There are worse lots in life. Most of us would be more than happy to serve God in one of those capacities, but Isaiah teaches us, and other prophets we'll see later on, teach us that being a great servant of God may mean doing much less desirable work. What if God asked you to walk around embarrassed for 3 years? or to teach a message that was going to get everybody around you to hate you? Would you still want to serve God? That's not the conference speaker position or the best-selling book author position. That's something else entirely. Would you still want to be God's servant? Would you want to be a great servant of God if that's the way that you're going to be a great servant of God? If the answer to that is no, then we need to take a close look at our hearts and ask what our real motivations are for serving the Lord and how deep our convictions really run. Okay, so that is the short 20th chapter of Isaiah, and hopefully I will be seeing you back here tomorrow to tackle chapter 21.